Good day and welcome to Salam Media Highlights right here on Salam Media, your home of humanitarian journalism with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. And today we'll reflect on the life and the legacy of the late Tito Mboweni, a pivotal figure in South African governance, who unfortunately passed away on the 12th of October, just last week in 2024. Tito Mboweni, known for his no-nonsense approach and bold policy making, served as a labor minister, governor of the Reserve Bank, and finance minister at some point. His leadership spanned major policy reforms from stabilizing inflation to energy deregulation, and his decisions to continue to shape South Africa's public sector today and for a very, very long time. And one of the most controversial aspects of Tito Mboweni's tenure as finance minister was the government wage freeze, a move that divided opinion between those seeking fiscal discipline and public servants who felt the strain. And joining us today to unpack the impact of some of these policies and the general legacy of Tito Mboweni within the public service sector and in South African governance in general is Tahir Maepa. He's the Secretary General of the Public Service and Commercial Union, PSCU for short, and is joining us via our virtual platform. Tahir, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you here on Salam Media.
Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure to be with you.
I think, first and foremost, as someone who represents, the public sector workers, what are your initial thoughts on the legacy that Tito Mboweni leaves behind, as he served for such a long time in the South African government sphere?
Look, anybody's legacy is usually determined by public opinion about that particular person. And the public opinion is propelled by the manner in which the person handled themselves in different capacities within the sphere of whatever they've been assigned to do. Now, if you look at Tito Mboweni from 1994, a lot of people even forgot that he was once a minister of labor under the administration of President Nelson Mandela. And as a trade unionist and workers in general, that was a very important period in the history of our labor legislation in the country. And it was during that period that workers managed to gain a lot during his tenure as the Minister of Labor. I mean, the Labor Relations Act, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, Employment Equity Act. So those reforms, they were pro the working class. And you would know that between that period of Nelson Mandela and then post Nelson Mandela into the period of Thabo Mbeki,
All right, we seem to have lost Tahir in a bit there, but I will definitely be sure to get him back on, and we'll be discussing, I think, a very, very important political figure in South Africa's history since 1994, and the government of, majority rule in essence came to be, and Tito Mboweni at the very center of some of the most important, sectors and spheres of South Africa's government. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll try and get in contact with Tahir Maepa just to continue with our conversation. But sure to tune in as we'll be getting more from him after this short break.
Humanity sets the agenda.
You South African, of course. You anxious about the future. We've got you covered. Build on your wealth portfolio with Rendry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange. Visit us at 151 Stephen Dlamini Road, Musgrave, Durban, or call us on 031 202 4700 for more information. Rendry Jewelers Gold Coin Exchange, your passport to gold investment.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media Highlights with myself, Salalo Makwidi, right here on Salam Media. If you just joined us, we are having I think a very, very important conversation with Tahir Maepa, who's the Secretary General of the Public Service and Commercial Union, PSCU for short. And we're just unpacking, I think, a very, very important figure in South African politics, Tito Mboweni, who I think, in his time as a public servant, held so many or was at the helm of so many important, portfolios in South African government. And we are just chatting about his legacy and what he leaves behind, and maybe some of, even some of the misses that he's had. I think one thing that we shouldn't be shying away from is talking about the hits and the misses, also some of the things that he might have gotten wrong. And Tahir Maepa is joining us via a virtual platform. Tahir, before we lost you for a moment there, we're still unpacking on his legacy, and how as a public servant, as a public figure, particularly in government, there'll always be contrasting opinions about your time in various portfolios that you might have held.
Yes, as I was saying, that look, that period when he was the Minister of Labor, it was a very prosperous period for the working class. And then when President Mbeki took over as the president of the country, obviously the economy was booming, everything was going well, and it sort of demystified this fallacy that our labor laws are too stringent and that they are not meant to attract investments. Because if that was the case, then the period between Nelson Mandela and Thabo Mbeki should have been a very gloomy period. But it was quite a prosperous period for the workers and also for the for the investors and capital. Now, Tito Mboweni played that important role in making sure that he stabilizes the, for the lack of a better word, the relationship between capital and the working class. Because of where there's prosperity, everybody gains. Not that we have agreed with all the policy positions of the government, because of some of them, obviously, we felt that they were leaning too much towards capital and they were not necessarily responsive to what the country need. Being a third world country, South Africa it is, where we believe that we need to push for a job creation, not necessarily austerity in order to appease the outsiders. But in terms of his role as a minister, I really commend him, and we will remember him to be one of the friends of the working class. And he also then became the governor of the Reserve Bank. And again, it was during that period where they introduced things like inflation targeting and all that. Now, the issue of inflation targeting, to keep it as low as possible, the beneficiaries usually are the workers, because of when the inflation is low, then there's more buying power in the hands of the workers, and we are able to propel the economy because of we've got money to spend in order for us to be able to do that. So he continued in terms of his legacy to make sure that he stabilizes our economy and to try and find a middle ground between two varying positions of those of us who are social inclined and those who are capital inclined. And he really did his best to make sure that also as a first black governor, and obviously we all know what happens when you become the first black somebody in a position, a very powerful position like that. There were all sorts of things about it, especially those who come from the old era who believe that black people are incapable of running institutions of wealth. And Tito demonstrated that it is possible. We are more than capable. We are equipped. We are ready to make sure that we take the country forward. And indeed, he did that, despite the fact that he supported the independence of the Reserve Bank, something that we oppose. We believe that the Reserve Bank has to be nationalized in order for it to be responsive to the needs of all South Africans, not only the shareholders of the Reserve Bank, but in terms of his contribution as a governor towards the broader economic development. I think it's something that we must all be proud of, Tito Mboweni.
And I think you touched a bit on him essentially being, a friend of the workers. But one of the most controversial decisions, and I think it ultimately led that relationship between himself and the workers not being so cordial, was the wage freeze. I think back in 2019, where he aimed to control public sector spending, and there was this 3-year wage freeze on public servants. What did you make of this decision, number one? Number two, how did it impact public servants? And how do you think unions responded to it at the time? Was it a decision that should have been welcomed because the aim was to cut government expenditure, but it came at the expense of the workers?
Yes, you see, the whole thing about that austerity measures that he introduced, remember, it was immediately after we came out of the COVID pandemic. Obviously, the economy was not doing well. However, the manner in which it was done, I think that's where the problem is. And these are some of his failures and the failures of the current government. The current government is got this attitude that they will only speak to those who are closer in proximity to them. And they never took everybody into confidence in terms of the state of affairs of the country. All that they did, they went to the usual suspect and spoke to them and try and convince them to accept this austerity. But the challenge that, for instance, COSATU had at that particular moment was the fact that if they agreed to that, majority of the workers in this country are not part of the COSATU alliance bloc. That would have weakened COSATU even more. So they had no choice but to go against it. But I'm saying that sometimes when a country is facing difficulty, you call everybody, even those that you don't agree with. But because of this habit that they have, that they only talk among themselves, and this is exactly what transpired. But when the wage freeze came into when he refused to honor the second leg of the wage agreement in the public service, the mistake again, it was the unions. Instead of them using the collective power as trade unions in terms of the Labor Relations Act, because of this emanated from an agreement that was signed. And if you have an agreement with an employer and the employer refuses to honor that agreement, you don't take that employer to court. That was one of the most stupid decisions that were made. Whether it was made deliberately, because of we all knew that there is no court in the world that will be able to say that any employer or any business must honor an agreement that is going to cost a couple of billions when that employer is in the red. It doesn't work like that. So you use collective power in order to push and to force them to honor that agreement. And we said to these unions who went to the Constitutional Court, do not fall into that trap. That's exactly where Tito wants you to be. That's where the government wants you to be, and you're going to lose. But they thought that hiring this top senior advocates from Santain will change the reality of what the world looks like and how the courts view matters when they are before them. And they lost. So that loss, it was not because of Tito Mboweni. It was because of the stupidity of the unions who took him to court to try and force him to honor that particular agreement. So they simply fell into a trap, and unfortunately, the workers, even to date, they are still paid the price.
Mm. Do you believe the wage freeze was necessary for fiscal stability, or maybe it undermined the rights and the morale of public sector workers?
Look, everything in the labor space can be negotiated. If the country is faced with difficulties, financial difficulties, then you need to call all parties involved to a table and you need to be transparent about what you are going through. But you would have found it very difficult to convince at least us to say that there must be austerity, there must be a wage freeze when you can't account for 1 trillion that has been lost, that you are responsible for. So if you look at it from that point of view, there's this wastage and corruption and maladministration that is not stopping. In fact, is being fueled within his own party. And yet you expect the poor workers to be the ones who bear the brand. So it was not going to work either way. However, like I'm saying, everything it can be negotiated. And one of the things that I said to one of the ministers when we were engaging about this particular point, I said, one of the ways to deal with this thing is that sign a debt agreement with the unions to say that you owe us at this present moment. You do not have money to honor that agreement, but it's a debt to be paid in future. That is something that we can take to our members, because of our members will know that, okay, I didn't lose anything. Yes, for now, I'm not going to get anything. However, in the future, I'll be able to recoup that money. Obviously, they were not going to agree to that because of these idiots already took them to court, and then the rest is history.
Mm, mm, mm. Tito Mboweni's career, I think if there's one standout, theme to it, was almost always trying to strike a balancing act between labor and fiscal responsibility. From your perspective, did he strike the right balance? The tension between fiscal discipline and also social responsibility towards the workers. Do you think in the various portfolios that he was at the helm of, did he strike the right responsibility, or were in most cases than not workers left behind in the process?
In that role, it's very difficult to strike a balance, because at the end of the day, if you are a minister of finance of the country, the issue of the salaries is just one expense. There's health, there's police, there's social development. There's a lot of things that he has to look at. Now, obviously, from his point of view, at that particular moment, probably that was the easiest way out. But it was not solving the problems that the country was facing. Because when you bring reforms, you don't punish and not bring an alternative that will in future remedy that punishment. And that is the part that this government, unfortunately, has always been struggling in terms of trying to find a balancing act that makes sense to everybody. There was too much pressure on our government from rating agencies and other lending agencies to say that the public service has been bloated. And this chorus has been sung for the past 15 years to say the public service of South Africa is bloated. It needs to be curtailed. But the issue is not the bloated public service. All that they were saying is that government is owning too many assets that are supposed to be in private hands. Because remember, if you don't have the capacity, the staff to propel the government machinery, then you'll have to outsource those services. So the lending agencies and some within the ANC and some within the opposition, all that they wanted was to move towards privatization of state assets. But the only thing that was standing between them and achieving that, it was the public service. Then they coined this thing about the bloated public service to justify why they should be, because of all that they had to do is to say that if the public service is indeed bloated, it means that you need to make head count. You can't say the public service is bloated when one doctor has to serve 1,000 patients. How do you make sense of that? You need more doctors. So you cannot say that is bloated. What was bloated is what the government owned, and they wanted a piece of it. And that is why even the current administration is continuously pushing for the privatization of many of the state assets by making them redundant and ineffective to justify that privatization.
I want to focus a bit on energy deregulation and economic reforms that Tito Mboweni was responsible for. And one of those was allowing private power generation. Well, he's credited with that, and that is also credited with reducing the severity of load shedding. I think, just today government and Eskom are celebrating almost 200 days without load shedding, or maybe official load shedding. And this goes back to, some of Mboweni's energy reforms, which allowed for private power generation. What impact did these reforms have on public institutions? And is it something, as a union observing, from the outside, thought it was one of most important decisions that needed to be taken at the time, and ultimately we are reaping the rewards thereof right now?
Auslaila, do you believe that nonsense is because of
that's why I'm
private
asking. I don't know. I'm asking.
No. Look. Let's say this. I have no problem to have private producers into the whole mix of things, because as a consumer, I need to be given a choice who I want nature. And we cannot have a situation where ESCOM, as big as it is, mustn't have competition. ESCOM must serve a particular people. And let's go back to history, why ESCOM was established. Despite the fact that obviously because of the sanctions and all that, but it was also established as a social compact institution in order to serve the majority of the poor, the poorest of the poor. The rich can always go to the private producers of energy and buy their energy from there. But you cannot weaken ESCOM to the extent that the poorest of the poor will be left behind simply because of you are pushing for private producers to come into the grid. Let them come into the grid, let there be competition, because where there's competition, usually the price reduction comes into play. I have no issues with that, but that it doesn't mean that ESCOM should be weakened. ESCOM must be left as it is. It must be capacitated even more, because country that requires energy, and we are going to require even energy in the future, because of South Africa is a developmental state. It's going into a transition now. Things may not be going well now, but the future is going to be brighter, which is going to require more innovation, is going to require more energy in making sure that we propel infrastructure development in the country. And if we can have private sector coming in and still having this big monster called ESCOM being run efficiently by competent people, that will help the economy to move forward. You cannot weaken one in order to justify another. That is the part that I have a clear disagreement with.
I want us to take a quick break. There seems to be some distortion of the sound. So while our producers fix that, we'll come back and wrap up our conversation.
Cool.
Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media Highlights with myself, Salailo Makwidir, and we're having a really, really interesting conversation on the legacy of the late Tito Mboweni, who unfortunately passed away after a short illness just 2 days ago on the 12th of October, just this month. And we're just touching on various aspects of his legacy and some of the important reforms and deregulation and regulations that he imparted as he was leading various portfolios, many obviously affecting the labor force in the country. And joining us just to unpack the legacy of Tito Mboweni is Tahir Maepa, is the Secretary General of the Public Service and Commercial Union, PSCU. Tahir, thank you so much for staying with us. We are now coming at the back end of our conversation. One question that I feel would be very, very important to ask is, do you believe Tito Mboweni's preference for market-driven solutions weakened or strengthened public services overall?
Look, you can't take anything as raw as it is presented. It was a good attempt, but unfortunately, it came at a price. And again, the price was the austerities that would have affected the workers negatively. And obviously, the policy position of the ANC, unfortunately, or the government, is a moving target. When they are faced with difficulty, they always want to take an easy way out. They go for the low-hanging fruit and damage the core of what has been propelling the economy of the country. And there's a number of the reasons why the economy is where it is. And we cannot blame any other person except the government itself. They failed. You can't have a situation where you had a period where this country was doing very well and we were debt free. And all of a sudden, we are in a position where our debt is growing at billions per day. It shows that something went wrong somewhere. And obviously, the administration, the current administration, and including the previous one, because the current administration is a confusing one. We don't know what is happening. But from the previous administration until now, it was just downhill. Things were just falling apart. And I think when Tito Mboweni came in, and he was begged literally, I was told, to come to be the finance minister, a position that really a rightful thinking person will never take under the circumstances, because it's one of the most difficult portfolios. He tried to navigate around it. The only problem that Tito had, and that was his strength at the same time, he was just too honest for a politician. You know, there's certain things you even if you feel strong about them, you say them in the boardroom, But Tito was not that kind of a person, and that's what I liked and appreciated about him, because of what you see is what you get. He's not those politicians who will give you this impression and go around and do something else. When he feels strong about something, he will put it out there and then let everybody go to town about it. And then if he gets his way, he will implement and he will move on. Whether we are happy or unhappy, it's neither here nor there. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves, what he tried to do, what has it produced for the broader economic upswing of the country? Unfortunately, it didn't work, and it's not working. And that is why you are seeing a situation that this current minister will also do the same thing when we come to midterm budget statement. We are going to hear all these horror stories about public service and all that and all that and all that, because of the problem that they have. They don't have a solution to our economic problems. They don't have a policy framework that can be able to take us out of here. People like the current president, they can't wait for their term to finish, so that they must just run, because things are not looking good. But South Africa, I still believe it has potential. And Tito Mboweni was one of those. He was an intellectual. The man was talented. He served this country, and he had the ability to assist this country to move forward. But unfortunately, the circumstances that prevails at this point in time, you can be a genius, you will never get it right under the current circumstances.
And I think we're going to leave it on that note, Mr. Maepa. Thank you so much for your time and your valuable insights into Tito Mboweni's legacy, which is undoubtedly very, very complex, spanning bold economic reforms, fiscal discipline, and a lasting impact on the labor landscape. And I think, it's just seeing from now onwards the current crop of leaders who you don't seem to have much confidence in, take out from his legacy. But we're going to leave it here for now. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Slel.
There you have it. There was Tahir Maepa, and I think very, very insightful and important conversation on what is seemingly a very, very complex legacy of Tito Mboweni, and as South Africa continues to grapple with wage negotiations, which are going to be coming in the midterm and the new fiscal year. Budgets are going to be coming in, and there's going to be more and more fiscal challenges and reforms. I think Tito Mboweni's legacy offers very, very important lessons, both for policymakers and unions working towards a balanced future. So I think a very, very big loss for South Africa, and condolences to his family, his friends, and all those that knew and loved him. A true patriot indeed. Someone that really loved the country and believed in South Africa despite very difficult circumstances. And indeed, South Africa has lost one of its major leaders. We're going to leave it here for now. Salam Media Highlights continues after the short break.